This meeting is called to order. Welcome to the Wednesday, April 2nd special meeting of the Board of Education. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Remain standing for a moment of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I want to first apologize for the late start. We were just conducting some interviews and ran a couple minutes late, but we're here. So I'm going to turn over to Ms. Trombetta to present the We Are Sachem Superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to start by just recognizing that this is National Autism Awareness Month, and today is actually National Autism Awareness Day. So I'd like to let everyone know about that. Secondly, I'd like to thank the other night we had our first Sachem Educational Gala, and it was a huge success. Chris Vaccaro and the team, everyone on the committee and all the work that went in, we raised, we don't know the final details yet, but approximately $25,000, which will go directly to our students and our staff. So very excited about that. That's something I hope we continue to see grow. It was a night that we were able to celebrate Sachem and all that makes Sachem special. So it was very special for us to be there, and I appreciate everyone's hard work. And next, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Sarakis for the budget presentation. Thank you.
Okay, so we're here for budget draft number 6. I want to start by saying there's not very many changes to this presentation from the one that we did last week, so I'll just highlight a few of slides. I did want to say that the presentation is in the public portion of board docs for anyone who's at home who wants to follow along. Yeah, I think it's good now.
Just for clarification, we called this tentative meeting tonight because I know there were some concerns and questions from the board as to the transportation proposition that's being proposed by our administration, as to what does $1.7 million look like if we went back to restoring that $1.75 million, what would have to be lost and how it would impact. So
Jump to that step, Michelle.
yeah, so if you want to go through it, Michelle, and just kind of review what we talked about, what the recommendation is, and then
the last slide is that reduction.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So I just want to start with a couple of the challenges that we started with in these last few budget cycles. So this inflation factor, right. So this chart shows our CPI, our inflation factor, as it is against our 2%, which is what factors into our tax levy formula. So you could see over the past 4 years, we had for 22-23, inflation was 4.7%. We were limited to 2% in that one step out of 13 of our tax levy calculation. Then in 23-24, we were at 8%, and again, limited to the 2%. So over this 4-year period, inflation is cumulative. So we have seen 19.72% increase in our inflation, yet for those 4 years, we were limited to 2% in our tax levy. So that's a difference of 11.72% where costs, everyday costs for everyone, had increased, but we were not able to keep up with that cost. And the cost of operating our district is outpacing what we were able to raise in revenues. So that's partly what has put us in the situation that we're in. So speaking of the tax levy, this is the levy that was filed with the State Comptroller's Office on March 1st. It is a 2.2005% increase over the current year. That is at the tax cap. We're not looking to pierce in this scenario. And the levy does include that $9 million transfer to capital, which addresses our facility needs. That's one of the exclusions that gets calculated into this formula. State aid, as I indicated last week, we did reduce state aid by approximately $559,000 to take into account the enrollment data that's going to be used with the final budget as compared to the governor's budget. I did attend an Eastern Suffolk BOCES meeting this morning, and the word is that the budget will be passed before the legislature leaves for the spring break. So sometime by the end of next week, we should have final budget numbers.
So Michelle, on that, if they come back where they didn't cut us the 500, that would be put right back in, correct?
Correct, but the numbers that they're using, it should be the reduction, but we'll, like, fingers crossed. So overall, we're seeing a 0.48% increase, or actually a 0.5% increase in our state aid over the current year, which is basically $690,000. And then our other revenues, as we indicated last week, we did not reduce the interest and earnings because it doesn't look like interest will be reduced as quickly as we thought it was going to be. The Fed is looking at possibly not reducing rates till sometime in the second half of the year. We also put in the $21,000 we received in donations, and we eliminated the E-rate funding, as Mr. Sachs discussed last week, because it doesn't look like we're going to be eligible for it, and we didn't want to jeopardize our BOCES aid. So again, this is the same chart that shows the changes from the March 12th budget presentation, because we haven't changed this over last week's, and this does show that we continue to work on our BOCES commitments for the upcoming year. We're revising estimates as we get the data in, but also to note on here that while we hadn't reinstated the BOCES Arts and Education expenditure line item, this program can be funded through donations from the PTA. So while the district doesn't have an expense line for it, what we could do is, as the PTAs make a donation, we do a budget adjustment and we increase our revenue budget, we increase that expenditure line, and it goes right in to pay for whatever program that the PTAs want to run. So that's one way. Go ahead.
Have you guys had any preliminary conversations with the PTA since maybe talking about this new change? I'm just interested about their feedback and do they think that could work?
Michelle spoke with Maria Sanders last week prior to the last board meeting and kind of walked through the steps of it. And then at last board meeting, we did talk about how it could be a donation immediately in, and we can adjust the line and keep track of it. So that way we know exactly the following year, whatever was put in and they were funded on through BOCES, we would know would go back to them.
Isn't it a little bit similar to how it's done now, except it's going to be more scrutinized, kind of?
So right now, the district budgets the full amount of the expenditure. And I tried to explain this in the email earlier. This current school year, we budgeted $800,000. The several school years prior to that, it was $1.3 million. I reduced the budget, or proposed the reduction of the budget last year for this current school year, because we weren't reaching that 1.3 million, but we have to have a balanced budget. So we needed a revenue source to offset that expenditure, and we knew we weren't getting that full amount in BOCES aid. So while we get BOCES aid on what we spend, so it has all gone through district funds. As we receive the donations throughout the year, those donations get deposited and credited to a miscellaneous revenue account. They're not specifically going to BOCES Arts and Ed, because the district has fully funded that in the budget. So it's already there. The district is being aided on what we expense. One of the issues that we have is we can't budget donations. They're not guaranteed. And the BOCES aid that we receive for arts and education, it comes on a report that we receive that details line by line what our BOCES aid goes to. We don't receive this report until December for the prior year. So in this past December, I received the 24-25 numbers that we're going to be aided on this year. So that makes it very difficult to budget the aid portion of it, because we don't know. We're doing the budget for 25-26 now. I won't know the BOCES aid, how the breakdown is, until December. So that's where it becomes difficult budget-wise, which is why I think for all the years that I've been able to go back through in Envision, it's always been a fully funded district expense. And then the donations just get deposited to that miscellaneous revenue account. So with the budget for 24-25, we're expecting to get about $480,000 in BOCES aid related to arts and education. But the budget is $800,000. And we allocated $600,000 district-wide to start everybody's program. And then we have the $200,000 that was set aside towards, I believe, like the senior trip and things like that. But that's how we've done it, fully funded through the district. it's a large expense. So given where we are now, it's difficult to fully fund that now.
Can I follow up with
Yes.
something?
Yep.
Technically, we're not looking to end arts and ed. We're looking to restructure how it shows in the budget. Is that correct?
How it's funded, right? So
Right,
we
but-
don't have a budget line for it right now. And PTAs can make donations, but those donations would have to be more timely, because if there's no expenditure line in the budget, we have no mechanism to pay the bill when it comes. So we would have to have that donation in hand when the bill comes.
So the community needs to hear that we're just expecting it to be a more streamlined process with the PTAs, because they're going to say, we've always been funding it. We've always been given the donations and, X, Y, and Z. Sometimes when there was a shortage, Sachem would take up the slack. But now we're going to be more meticulous with the donations and the funding part, so we can still be part of the program, and still get back the BOCES percentage. So we have all the seed money for the next year, but we're technically, Sachem is not looking to cut arts and ed.
No. And in addition to that, Stephanie, Michelle went back the last couple of years. The donation from the PTA varies greatly over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I
So
saw that.
that's when she's saying you can't budget for donations. The history shows that it's such a discrepancy, we couldn't even possibly begin to know where to budget.
But we're
on
not,
the
our
lower end.
intention isn't to get rid of arts
No,
and
we
ed.
would still run it through BOCES Arts and Eds, totally funded through the PTA, in which it would be earmarked then to get the BOCES aid back.
Thank you.
Okay. Meredith?
So I think where some of the confusion comes from is in the past, when you guys have put that line item, $1 million in the budget, we kind of as a community said, okay, that $1 million is there. Let's go pick what we're going to do with it. And if I'm understanding this, it's still going to be, we're going to do all these things, but it's PTA has to raise that money first, send it in. Now, will BOCES still, if we are not the ones actually, are we still going to be the ones writing the check?
It would still go through the district.
Okay, so they're going to donate it to us. Where they used to donate it back, they're going to donate it up front.
Correct.
Okay, and just the way that this, that our bus companies came to the rescue for our cheer teams and our Arrowets, they earmarked it that they specifically wanted their donation to go to that. Our PTAs can specifically say, this donation can only be used for arts and ed.
Correct. And then we would adjust the budget, deposit it to that expenditure code. And when the invoice comes in, we would pay for that program.
Okay, and because we have a large difference in the number of students in some schools, like a few hundred students more in one school than another. Has that ever affected the way that fundraising is done, or it's kind of like it'll still go the way it's always gone?
I'm not involved with the fundraising side of it, but that affects how the program, the seed money starts in the beginning of the year. It's based on the usage.
So the equity they
fundraising
get.
the fundraising would be different by building, to how they
Okay.
chose to do it through the PTA. We
But
don't
it-
dictate how any of the fundraising is done.
But it'll still be equitable, right? Or is it?
It could be
Whatever the-
fundraising, it could be contributions, student contributions for programs. It's however they want to run that.
Okay, so everybody needs to get involved. Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Mike, sorry?
No, actually, I was just going to mention, I was just ask Meredith's actual question is, so they would have to pay up front to then run their program. We would have to have the money first in order to adjust our budget and be able to pay that bill when it came in.
Correct. So they would look at, say there's a program in October that they wanted, right? We would work with BOCES, do the contract to organize that program, whatever it may be, whether it's a trip or bringing something in. They would do the fundraising, make the donation to the district. We usually get the bill about the month after it occurs. So sometime between September and the beginning of November, we would need that donation made and, accepted by the board and a budget adjustment completed so that then we could pay that BOCES bill.
Does that have to all be done like before they would execute the program? Like we have to have,
But we have to know that we're getting those funds.
That's what I
Like,
mean.
We can't have a program run in October And then the PTA says, we're short the funds. We couldn't
Right, that's what I'm
fundraise
getting at.
all of it because we don't have a mechanism to pay that.
Right.
So we would have to,
So that's the word, the
Yeah,
PTA
that-
have to
that's the
understand that
risk.
they'd
We
have
would
to
need that
fully fund
upfront.
it first before they execute the program.
Okay, Meredith.
At the end of a school year, a PTA is not really allowed to have money left over in their bank account. So is there going to be a way that they could, like, you don't want them to not have any programs September, October, November, December until they really start their fundraising. Nobody's really going to be fundraising over the summer, I don't think. Maybe they'll do a few things, but are we going to figure out something that's going to help them? Is there, like the way that years ago we decided to make a capital reserve? Is there some type of
I
way
don't-
that we
I
could
don't
use a
think
reserve
there's
or
a
something?
reserve for arts and ed or BOCES funding. There's no reserve for that.
Yeah. and
But
the
are they
question
allowed to
is,
keep it in their PTA
Are they
fund?
allowed to encumber that money?
They can?
Yeah. so
Oh,
they can
okay.
hold
All my
on to
years on
money.
PTA, every decision, not allowed to have it at the end of the year. You got to
Yeah,
spend it all. You
okay.
got to spend it all.
Okay.
That's why we do all these
As
end
a
of year
former
big
treasurer
things.
from 100 years, you're allowed to carry over your expected beginning of the year expenses.
Okay.
So you're never going to leave yourself in a situation where, hopefully, if you have a decent
Right.
team on your PTA, but it's the PTA's responsibility to accept their own budget
Okay.
and then budget accordingly for the next year and roll over whatever they need to roll over to start the beginning of the next year. It's just, this is going to make planning a little bit more precise.
Good.
We
need
were in
that.
a situation where we didn't have to really count every penny. Now it's just, we're going to have to count every single penny and everybody's going to have to, move together a little bit. And I don't know if the district could help facilitate that, but the PTAs, I believe they have the capability and they will be okay. with
But that's
this.
great that you said that because I've worked with the PTA for many years and our understanding, and again, things get passed down from generation to generation. And, if you
You
pass
can't
down,
hoard
if
money.
you pass down a misnomer, it gets
Right.
passed down. So the fact that, I always thought by the end of the school year, you got to spend everything. And that's kind of, we used to go on spending
You can't
sprees.
hoard and it can't look like you're like, they want to prevent a situation where you're stacking
Right.
so that you spend it in the future.
Okay.
You're supposed to spend it where you're at, but
Right.
it's fair to say you want to make sure the kids the following year have the
Same
same
experience.
experience the kids every year prior.
Perfect. Thank you.
And because we are changing this, mechanism of funding, they're going to have to plan to be able to do that and be given the leeway to be able to do that, knowing that if trips in September, October, they're going to encumber some money to offset those costs. Yeah. So, any other questions? Alex?
I don't know if it's going to be good. Just clarification. Before you mentioned that the inflation rate, we're not keeping up with the inflation rate, and you said that was like partly why we're in financial distress. Is it partial or most?
Matthew, if you could just move the microphone closer so they can hear it all.
Sorry. Is it partly or mostly? So if you had to make a pie chart on why we're having financial issues, how much of that pie would be that inflation piece?
So between our tax levy and our state aid, which I know Mr. Icernia likes to say, these are two formulas that we have no control over, that represents over 90% of our revenues. So over 90% of our revenues, we can't, I don't want to say control, somebody else dictates how we get funded for those.
And to answer, Matt, also, I think it's 5.49% is about $6 million that we've been off between the inflation rate and what we've been receiving. And that's what that percentage last year, when we went out to the board with a cap budget, would have reset that whole levy. So that's where that number came from. Other question, Matt, Alex?
Just quickly going back to the PTA, can we maybe call a meeting that maybe district office can run it or somebody can run it just for open lines of communication to say, I know that this is not the way you've always done it, but this is the way it's going to be next year. Answer any questions that they have, maybe whether it's the PTA council or call all the buildings into it. You could do it in this room just so they know now that this is the expectation going into September. That way we don't hit them with it in September and then they are behind the eight ball before they even start.
Yes, we'll set something up.
Thanks.
Mr. Attorney?
I think Mr. McCarthy is going to back this up. We just have to be careful that we remain separate from any fundraising efforts on the behalf of the PTA. I don't know the
Yeah, I
technical-
mean, the district cannot participate proactively in fundraising for instructional or non-instructional programs. I mean, the PTA is a separate organization. I understand the intent, but the Commission of Education, the regulations have a prescription against a school district proactively involving itself in a fundraising effort.
So if we were to work with Maria Sanders, the head of the PTA council, and then she can have the meeting with the PTA, would that be better?
Yeah, I think that it should be left to the discretion and to the organization of the PTA. I think, again, I could advise you, separately, but you have to be very cognizant of your obligations in terms of not proactively fundraising, because there's a prohibition against the district actively fundraising. You can't do that pursuant to the commission's regulations. So while we can receive a donation, while we can dedicate a donation in furtherance of a specific cause, to the extent the Board of Education approves that, you have to be careful not to commingle yourself in the actual fundraising activities.
Alex?
So just to follow up, you're saying that, and you don't have to say it out here, whether you advise in the back or up here, but you're saying that we can't call a meeting. I'm not telling them how to fundraise or the best methods of fundraising, but just give them a heads up that this is not going to be business as usual. Like, if they're not watching this meeting, they may not know. So there's no way for us to inform, educate, be transparent, however you want to say it, just so that everyone is now aware that there is a new way of doing business. I'm not telling anybody how to fundraise. I'm just saying that
I
they
think that
have to know that they.
Yeah, I think that's, Alex, I think that's a fact-specific inquiry. So I think, depending on, we can certainly involve ourselves in providing advice to the district in terms of how to set that meeting up and the extent to which the district would participate, but it's very fact-specific.
Yeah. So the state doesn't want to give us money, and then they want to tell us how to not raise money. They're tremendous. It's really it's a great organization.
Alex, I think Patty bringing Maria in, and then maybe having Maria run the meeting along with Patty at the meeting, I think would be probably within our legal.
No, I think Patty can't
You can't be at the meeting at all.
I believe Maria is probably watching, or she will go back and watch. And
Yeah.
somebody from PTA council
Yeah.
will know that this happened, and it's their job they meet with all of theirs, and it's their job to get that word out there. They will get it out there.
Laura?
So I think if I'm understanding, if the district administration has a meeting advising the PTA to fundraise, to fund that line, that is where we cross the line. So you can't hold or have our administration be there for that meeting, but one-on-one, I think some of our booster clubs had run into similar issues back when Mr. Clayton sat in that seat. And again, district administration cannot sit and host a meeting and tell PTA, you have to raise money to now fund this line. It's not business as normal. That's what I believe
That's
for us is a line.
that's a fairly accurate statement.
Okay. Sabrina?
But again, it's fact specific, and we can, of course, advise the district in terms of seeing where the regulations meet the road in terms of what the district wants to do.
Right.
Sabrina?
It's more procedural, the fact of letting them know, that to make sure that they have stuff to cover their beginning of the year, and that when you are planning a program, that payment has to come in immediately. I think that's the thing that just needs to get out to every,
Yeah.
and then they do what they need to do to make things work. But just to understand, don't go putting something into arts and ed, and then you're not going to have the money till you do that fundraiser in November, but plan the event for October. Just letting them understand that this is how it's going to go going forward, and make sure every PTA knows that, because we don't have that line to cover anything anymore. I think that's all we're looking for.
Yeah. Good. Steph?
In the past, we've gotten guidance from district on how to donate. I think that's really just what the gist of it is. So the way you donate to the district to get the arts and ed credit would be changed procedurally. We've had that happen in the PTA before with exactly arts and ed. So you're not asking them to fundraise. You're just telling them that if they do, this is how it has to get donated.
Yeah, we'll get the whole thing figured out and certainly convey that information to, the PTA council president. And then they can convey that information to their members. All right. Yeah.
So this is our expenditure budget by object, which is our summary breakdown by the largest areas. And you can see we are at a 1.77% increase over the current year. That's a $6.6 million increase. So we're looking at a budget for the 25-26 school year of $380.9 million. And again, you could see our largest line item is our salaries. They are 46, just under 47% of our budget, and it's increasing at less than 2%. It's at a 1.89% increase.
Questions from the board?
So in summary, this will show our state aid, other revenue and tax levies, and the allocated reserves and or fund balance that we're projecting to balance this expenditure budget of $380.9 million. This is the way we presented last week, where we're showing $1.75 million in the use of reserves, and that would make up the difference of the transportation. So that if the Proposition 2 for transportation were to pass, we wouldn't need to use the reserves, or that money would be available to go back in when we close the books at the end of the year. But we're looking to fund that that line item with the use of reserves. And I will get to where we were tasked to make that reduction.
Okay. Questions from the board?
So this 2.2005% tax cap is a tax cap compliant budget, and this is just what the cost to the average homeowner here in Sachem would be. So we would look at approximately $142 for the year on school taxes if you're a resident of Brookhaven, approximately $160 for the year increase if you're a resident of the town of Islip, and $148 for residents of the town of Smithtown. So proposed capital projects, the same list that we presented last week with that $9 million transfer to capital that I indicated is in the tax levy calculation. This is the other side of it to do our, needed facilities, upgrades and maintenance on our buildings. So budget highlights, this budget as presented maintains all curricular programs at their current levels. We maintain our drama and music programs. We maintain the transfer to capital to ensure our infrastructure needs are completed to preserve our buildings. And it maintains most of our athletic programs, some through general fund appropriation and some through community donations.
Questions from
And-
the board?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
And then this is the proposed Proposition 2 that would be placed on the ballot to adjust the transportation limits for the 25-26 school year. We are looking for, currently we are at a K through 12. Anyone at the half mile mark receives transportation. We're looking to change that to K through 8 would be at the 1 mile, and 9 through 12, anyone over 1 mile, 1.5 miles. The maximum the maximum distance for transportation at the state level is 15 miles. We currently have that 15 miles at our K through 8 level. Our 9 through 12 transportation maximum is currently listed at 25 miles. We are looking to reduce that down to the 15 miles as well. And that would give the district a projected savings of the $1,750,000 in the 25-26 budget. So,
I'm sorry, just one question.
Sure.
Going back to the budget highlights, it says maintains all curricular programs at current levels. We talked about this last week, okay? There was a original proposal to increase target sizes at the elementary level by 2, which would have resulted in 8 to 10 FTEs, okay, and would have increased class sizes in some situations considerably. We're not doing that now. What we're talking about doing is just looking at a couple programs that are close and increasing just maybe 4 sections. Is that correct?
It actually is less than 4 sections at the elementary. Right now, it's 2 to 3, and most of the reductions that we found to meet that number came from the secondary level and through attrition, absorbing positions, resignations. So we were able to lower that number so the class sizes wouldn't increase in that budget size.
So very, very, very different than the early budget process when we started talking about this. We talked about increasing across the board, a cap of two per high, 2 students per grade level.
Yeah, and that the tough part about that is that it's very early on in the stage, so we don't have retirements solidified, who's returning, who's not returning, and then also our scheduling process at the secondary is at the tail end right now. Actually, I'm meeting on Friday with the secondary principals to start the final stages of our planning for next year.
And it maintains most athletic programs. The only program we'd be losing, my understanding, is the gymnastics because of low enrollment. But
That's
everything
correct.
else is what same levels as
What
last
we-
year.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Proposition 2. Anybody have questions on Proposition 2?
So I know there were some questions on what those new walker zones would look like, and we did attach a map for each building to the Friday packet last week, and I know it's difficult to see on that. So what we did with transportation, and we have to make it a little clearer, but we were able to zoom in for each building on what the walker zone looks like. But when we zoom in to make it this big, we lose some of the street names. So transportation worked on it today, where we're doing the boundaries, just labeling those streets so that anyone can see if you're within that circle, you would be a walker now, and anyone outside of it. But we have to make this a little clearer. I'm going to work on this tomorrow with transportation. But we do have this for every building, and that can be posted to the website.
Okay. Alex?
Yeah, so after we had the board meeting, days after Newsday, put this whole big thing out about how dangerous our roads out. It was a big article and big follow-ups. There's major roads that I'm not comfortable putting my name on this prop. Portion, Vets Highway, the Long Island Expressway. I mean, there are kids that live on the opposite side of Vets that live over in that Church Street area that may walk to Grundy that some people know about. Like there's an area over there, constant, bad. It's not good. Is there a way to cut like certain roads out of it, even like expand the circle, but cut out the major roads so that we don't have kids crossing major intersections? Even parts of Portion, it turns into 4 or 5 lanes. I mean, that's just, there's got to be a way to save money, but still err on the side of safety.
So let us work on this tomorrow, and then we can send this out to everyone so that we could see exactly what it entails. I can't speak building by building, what the roads are yet, but we'll have that for you tomorrow.
Michelle, just a quick question, just to piggyback on that. If we're going out with a proposition that clearly says half mile to a mile, how can we exclude certain roads under that? If the community votes for it and supports it, you wouldn't be able to.
You wouldn't be able to. So we have to see if those roads are included within it. But as of when we did our head count, and I know we talked about this last week also, we were saying that it's going to impact about 2,800 students up from the 600 now that are currently walkers. But when we did the head count for that week in March, we were at 60% ridership overall. I mean, some of our routes were at, 5% ridership, 10% ridership. So of the 10,000 students that could have been on a bus, 4,000 were not riding that bus already. So it could encompass a good portion of these students already are being driven to school.
All right. Meredith?
So, is there a way, and maybe it's a better question for you, is there a way to write the proposition so that it says a mileage, but any 4-lane road? Because like I live on Church Street, don't go egg in my house. And I couldn't even possibly fathom my children, and I'm all for this proposition, but I couldn't fathom my children crossing Vets Highway to get to Grundy. I mean, my youngest is 18. I still wouldn't let him walk across Vets Highway.
I mean, this proposition is drafted based upon the Board of Education policy that speaks to the mileage limitation. So that policy does not speak to four lanes of traffic or anything else. I understand the obvious safety concern, but this is actually modifying board policy, and it's in compliance with state law. So I would think it would be very difficult to carve out certain, factual descriptions of the road. I mean, that's something we could look into, but there's a basic premise in terms of propositions is that it should be essentially to the point and factually understandable for the electorate. So we would have to try to craft something that was to the point and easily understandable by the electorate. I'm not sure how we would do that. I mean, we could look into it, but we're also coming up against a deadline here too, because ballots have to go out, and for purposes of transparency, this has to be included in the district's legal notice of its annual election. So this is something that will likely take some time, and I'm not sure whether or not, we would be able to do it in a week or so, essentially.
But if it were passed the way that it reads now, then our hands would be tied and we wouldn't be able to say, okay, anybody who needs to cross vets or portion, we could give a bus to, because then it's a gift of public funds, isn't it?
Correct.
So we have to figure something
This
out.
proposition is based upon the board's transportation policy.
Right. And so then can we rewrite that policy or no?
First off, you would have to have direction of 5 board members. Right? If a board majority wants to direct them to do that, then it would have to come from 5 or more. I understand.
Because right now we have to decide, do we be
But-
fiscally responsible and at the safety of the kids, or do we?
Hold on. So we have pretty much 1 week, okay, before our scheduled adoption of the budget is going to happen. I understand what you're saying, but I know, Patty, you had spoken about contacting Suffolk County and getting more crossing guards for some of the dangerous roads so that kids are not crossing those roads unattended. I don't know how that, we, in this short period of time, we would be able to direct and carve out certain things. Look, at the end of the day, either we're funding it and we're putting it in and we're making $1.7 million worth of cuts, okay, or we're putting it out for community vote. It's really our only 2 options. Yeah, Vinny?
And Patty, how many other districts on Long Island actually do this already? We're like the only ones who are offering more
Yes.
than we're supposed to. So every other district is doing that. And we're using the word walker. Reality is it's just no transportation. So they wouldn't walk across Vets Highway. The parents are
I
responsible,
agree with that.
right?
No, I agree. And honestly, there's a coalition of other boards, and there are some boards that do give more, and they're right now doing the same thing we're doing. They're trying to pass it so that they go back within the limits, because this is costing a lot of money to every district, and I get that. I'm just, I wish there was a way to balance.
In a perfect time, if we were flush with money, we wouldn't even be having this conversation, I think. So, Laura?
So again, we're still providing more right now than the state requires. So this is being done, and we're still going to be within the state requirements.
Yes.
And we're going to ask for crossing guards, correct? I was just in Florida not too long ago, and where my sister lives, it's actually a 6-lane highway that kids walk across. There's a school right in her neighborhoods, 6 lanes. So I, of course, went to the crossing guard that was there, and they have a police car there. They stop all lanes of the highway, and the kids cross, and it's common practice all over down there. And it's something that I had never seen before. And until I saw it, I couldn't imagine it either. But it's being done on Long Island, but we've just never had to experience it in Sachem, because we've always done it where we've given more. So at some time, and I understand that if we weren't in the financial constraint that we are, we wouldn't be looking to do it. But at the same point, we also have to remember that once we do it, we have to always, moving forward, keep a sustainable budget. So it's better to do something and we're within the law, and we get crossing guards and we make it as safe as possible for our kids, because our kids are our priority, and we make it as safe as possible. And then we adapt to something that's sustainable, moving Sachem into the future. I just had my first grandchild who will be growing up in Sachem, and I want Sachem to be as great 5 years down the road when she starts kindergarten. So we have to look to make it sustainable moving forward.
I think we have to remember this is a proposition. The community has to vote on it. So if it's a yes, the community wants to save the 1.75. If it's a no, it is what it is. That's what it's going to come down to. I think rewording anything is putting a really gray area, because then you'll have people who say, I live on a dark street and at 6 o'clock, you have to hold to parameters such as this. I just want, Patty, if you can clarify again, so the families that send their kids to Catholic school understand what's going to be, and speak to late buses also.
Sure, absolutely. So we do have students that attend certain Catholic schools that fall within that limit, because we have that those students here with us, we are now responsible for transporting them. So we're going to have centralized locations where there'll be a drop-off place where they'll all take a bus to, whether it be St. John's or St. Anthony's. They will be dropped off as well back at the centralized location back within the Sachem boundaries. This will include late buses for children that are staying for sports and activities. What we provide for our own Sachem students, we will be providing for our parochial schools as well.
All right, Stephanie?
I just want to make the community aware that we're not in charge, the Board of Ed or the school districts are not in charge of crossing guards, but I would suggest in the future that we might make it a legislative action item, because previously I had called the appropriate people who handle crossing guards to ask for more for Sachem, and it's a humongous process. It's got to do with funding on the police side. It's not something we can do, but I want everyone to know that we could advocate for it as a community.
We would want to work as soon as, if this proposition was passed, we'd want to work with transportation immediately to take a look at the zones to see where the most dangerous roads were and start the process immediately.
Any other questions regarding this proposition? Okay. Michelle?
Okay. So this next slide is the proposed reductions. We were tasked, administration, to find the $1,750,000. We had some small reductions based on actual costs between Northwell Health and our student accident, but the majority of the reductions would come from two sources. One would be the elimination of middle school sports all across the board. That would save $577,000. And the other item would be to eliminate another 10 elementary positions at a cost of $1.1 million. So that would bring us to the $1,750,000, where we wouldn't have to appropriate those reserves, the two that we broke out at the $875,000 each.
So Michelle, just to be clear, these are proposed reductions. If the proposition doesn't pass, this is what we could be looking at next year?
No, this is if the board tasked administration last week to say, if we were not going to allocate the $1,750,000 in reserves,
Right, okay, got it.
how would we
Okay.
then, if the proposition didn't pass, meet that
Got it.
expense for transportation? And this
And that's how
is-
we would do it. Okay, thank you.
Because our recommendation is to
Right.
take it from reserves
Right.
if it did not pass.
I understand. Thank you.
Ms. Esternia?
Okay, Michelle, let's go back a couple of slides.
Uh-oh.
Let's go back to your expenditures first. All right, there. So again, let's put this in perspective for everybody. The budget we're proposing is only going up 1.77% from the year before, which is this year right now. So $6.6 million. Between our teachers, the top line and their benefits, which is about 75% of our budget, right?
That's all
Mike,
staff,
that's
not
all
just
staff,
teachers.
not just
I'm
teachers.
sorry, all staff, all salaries, correct, all salaries. It's not even rising 2%, right? So again, I point out all the time that the things we have control over, and with the cooperation of our bargaining units and our staff, we controlled everything that we have basically to control over that we were talking about before, right? But we still have a problem, right? So let's go to the next slide. So revenue, right? We all know sitting here that the way she's showing that coming out of the ERS reserve and the workman's compensation reserve is precisely what our auditor told us not to do. That I really have a big problem and cannot support a budget that's going to take restricted reserves to fund day-to-day operations, because you have to presume the proposition is not going to pass. You have to start with that presumption. That's why you have to have the money in the budget, right? If you were to do what they're showing there, that's a $13 million hole that we're starting with next year. We can close all three middle schools and not close that gap, right? Because they only get $4 million apiece. Right now, we still have an 11.904035 gap to close next year, right? So things are going to have to happen. So we really all know it is fiduciarily irresponsible to take from the restricted reserves. Those reserves are not for this purpose. But let me postulate some more. So, Michelle, let's go to your tax cap compliant budget. Right there, back right there. So if my calculations are correct, at the minimum, we need $1.75 million because I really also don't want to cut 10 more teachers. I mean, that would result in increased class sizes. Definitely don't want to do that. Don't want to cut middle school sports, right? That seems, again, people have to remember this school year that we're in is not our baseline. This is the slow deterioration. The real baseline should be like the 21-22 school year where everything was funded. You got to look at the opportunities that do no longer exist. It's not like we're starting, oh, everything was great this year, right? We're already at half clubs, right, from where we were just 3 years ago. So we're already on a downhill, so we cannot cut our way out of it. Anyway, but we need at least $1.75 million more in revenue. If my calculations are correct, that's about 3% on a tax levy, maybe 3.03, maybe
3.03.
3.03. And that results in about $5 more a month
Correct.
that we'd be asking above the tax cap to fund keeping class sizes at a minimum, continuing our middle school sports, not having to use restricted reserves in a way that we know we shouldn't be using them in. And more importantly, then the other thing I would do is because, and I think I mentioned last meeting, the money for the busing is in the budget. If that budget was to pass, we wouldn't need to cut the busing down in the following school year. We would have a year to figure out what's really the best way to make that savings come back, right? We could do a complete study, we could do surveys of our parents. I think we're allowed to do surveys to see who would be using. I think that's allowed, right? You could take surveys. We could spend the whole year. We could take surveys of everybody who's going to use busing in the 26-27 school year, right? I think a couple of parents came up and said, look, this was really very short-sighted. No?
No, we're funding the buses through reserves this year, so it's not like
No,
we pay the reserves back. I
No,
think
her
that's what Patty just
transportation
said.
line has $1.75 million for the busing.
Right, but we have to fund it on the revenue side. That's why we're showing
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
the reserves.
I'm saying at 3.03, we get the $1.75 million in the tax levy that we need to fund the buses.
But it's important to note that the gap being 13 million, the 3.03 would address 1.7 million this year. We would still have
Oh, we still
just
have
shy of $12 million
right. That's right.
gap
That's
next
right.
year.
I don't know if anybody has an appetite to go out. I don't know who has an appetite to go out of Pierce Cap budget. I know we're not going to go out of 3.7 because I don't think anybody has the appetite for that. That would really close everything up. But I still think before I use anything out of the reserves, which I would never do anyway, but before I cut 10 more teaching staff and more middle school sports, I would ask for the $5 more a month. I would suggest we go out at 3.03 and we modify the proposition that if the budget does pass with that extra money, we can maintain the busing as is for the following school year.
Mike, just so you know, it's on my list of options and leanings that I'm going to ask the board for.
Oh.
Okay, one of the three options as to
Okay.
where are we at. We have members that want to pierce the cap. What is that number? We have members that want to, restore the $1.7 million for transportation and make these cuts, or do we want to adopt what's being presented to it? So those are the three leadings that I'm.
But when do we have to adopt by next meeting?
Right, so of the next steps, April 9th is the budget adoption. So administration, we need to know when we leave tonight
Yeah.
what budget we're presenting next week to the community to say, here's the budget that's going to go up for adoption.
Okay.
Meredith?
So Michelle, if we did agree to go out with a pierced cap budget, and as we all know, that requires 60% majority of the voters. If that were to fail and the transportation failed, is the proposition allowed to be put on the next ballot again?
That's a legal question.
If we go for a tax cap, Pierce, and that fails, and Prop 2 also fails at the same time, now we have to go back out with another budget. When we go back out with that other budget, does Prop 2 get another chance to pass? Oh, I stumped him.
think only if that's the desire of the board. I think that's a decision of the board, how they want to put that back out for the second time.
Okay.
So that you need 5 votes to essentially put that back out.
Okay, but if we had 5 votes, we would get to put it back on for the next voting cycle.
My understanding, yes.
Okay.
Michelle? Anything else?
That's really it. Next week is the budget adoption, so we need to know what direction.
So we have a
for that
couple of
budget.
different things that we can look at. All right. We talked about piercing the cap at 3.7. We had numbers 3.5 and even now 3.03. Okay. I just know from the board if there's a majority of people that would consider that. Okay. And if, is that the direction of the board to administration? I understand there is a risk involved when it requires us to get 60%. Puts a Band-Aid or stops the bleeding a little bit. Next year, we're going to be looking at very similar situations. You know, it doesn't really reset the tax levy, but certainly helps with that little bit of extra revenue. There's a possibility that it fails and we have to go out with another budget, and it costs the district probably around $50,000 or $60,000. Is that correct, Allison? All right, so that's one option. So we'll take one option at a time. Yep.
Was the Budget Advisory Committee going to make a presentation?
So we've got a meeting tomorrow night based on the outcome of this meeting. We'll get together and they'll put they're going to work on their recommendations. We have an in-person meeting.
Okay.
And the goal is for them to be here next meeting to give their recommendations.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I think what you need is direction tonight as to how we need to proceed. All right. So we'll take a leading as to, do we want to pierce the cap? Okay. And at what percentage we willing to go? Sabrina?
I would want to, because I understand the financial piece to it and where it would put us as a district. I personally don't think we're going to get the 60%. If there was not that cap of 60%, I would say yes, but I have a feeling that's not going to happen. And to go through that route of what we did last year, I don't think it's good for the community.
Okay. So you're
I-
willing to be, you don't, not recommending this or no? Stephanie?
I agree with Sabrina, but I also have concerns of what's happening federally with our federal funding, and that might be a choice we need to do next year. So I wouldn't want to hit the community twice with a pierced tax cap. In addition, we have to have a serious conversation about what we're going to do with schools. So it's unfair to ask the community to go for extra additional funding only to have to cut more next year. And also the scary fact that we might be losing federal funding next year as well, which means that we would have to pierce the cap next year regardless.
Matthew?
This is not going to get any better. And this district, we have all built such an amazing district. I'm a Bayport guy, and I came to Sachem and I see how amazing Sachem is. But we're not going to be amazing if we don't start paying for what we get. You can't have a Cadillac education and pay for a Honda. It just doesn't work that way. We have to. The surrounding districts pay a lot more money in taxes than we do. They do, and that's just the bottom line. If you want a quality school district, which, by the way, increases the worth of your homes, the more we cut, the less our schools will be, and the less our homes will be worth. And the worst education, the education will be worse for our kids. So I would support.
Alex?
I mean, I wouldn't support it because I don't have any feelings in the community that it would pass, and to spend an additional 50, 60,000 when we want to keep that money where it is. I don't see it happening.
Thank you. Vinny?
And Mike, I don't disagree with you, right? I think, we've been talking about this, the reserves, and it's really not the right thing to do, but we're forced to do it right now. So I also agree with Stephanie because we've had this conversation. I think we've got a lot of work to do for the next school year in terms of buildings, the demographic study. So we may have to do this next year, right? So this year, I'm not in favor of it. I think we need to move forward. I don't think the community has an appetite until they see us continue to restructure this district. So I'm not in favor of it this year.
Okay. Laura?
I would not be in favor of piercing the cap at this point either. I do think at some times we will, What?
I'm sorry, Ed, what are you trying to
Yeah,
say?
Rob, I just conferred with our election expert, Neil Block, in furtherance of Meredith's question. And he says that you cannot, I'm wrong, you cannot put a transportation proposition back on for a second time.
I didn't think that was right.
Okay.
So I just want to correct myself. I conferred, he's our election expert, so this will be the one and only chance for the district to be able to put the transportation ballot on.
I'm sorry,
And I do agree with Matthew. I love Sachem's education. I'm excited that my next generation will be coming here. I love the education that my children got here. But as a board, we have to make difficult decisions. The transportation piece, going to the state limits, the state guidelines, like every other district has done, is something that we have to do. And we have to figure out a way to make it safe and good for our students. And that's something that maybe if we did 10 years ago and that did go through, then we would be used to it and have a different thing. So I think we have to look to have sustainable budgets. And with the changes coming along, we are going to have to pierce the cap. But a sustainable budget means that we can't pierce the cap every year to sustain it. So we have to figure out what is the best use of our money. How can we downsize certain things and keep the Cadillac education that Matthew refers to? So yes, at some point we have to increase it. The best assets Sachem has are our teachers. That's what makes the difference there. That's what makes our community. That's what is one of the things that makes Sachem so special, is what our teachers do for our students, what they do for them after school, what they do for them before school, and what they do for students, including mine, after they graduate. That's what makes our community special. And we have to figure out how to make everything else continue, but that's where our focus should be, on the education of our students.
Michelle, you had something you want to add?
Yes, just to clarify, changing the transportation maximums to 15 miles is at the state limits. We would still be providing more than the state for the minimum.
So we're still providing more.
At K through 8, changing it to a mile. The state
Okay.
limit is 2 miles.
I didn't even realize that.
And 9 through
So
12
now
is
we're
3 miles. So
providing
we're still
less, and even though we're going to up it, we're still providing more than the
Than the
state
state.
minimum. Thank you, Michelle.
Meredith?
When I first got on the board, I thought there was no way I would ever be behind piercing the cap. And then last year, I was wavering back and forth because I see why it needs to be done. We've trimmed any fat that we had. We've gone out. We've gotten better deals. We've done the best that we possibly could. And we still just don't have as much revenue. And yes, I've said it before, we pay a lot less taxes than our surrounding districts. So we're doing more with less. There is going to become a time when you do need to do that. You do need to pierce the cap. I just don't think that, I don't think that we're going to get it, that 60% this year. I just think there's too many other things going on right now and too many uncertainties. And I don't want to spend another 40, 50 grand for something that we know we're most likely not going to get. And it would be just, we just tried to cut things from the kids for 20 grand. And if it weren't for people giving us donations, that 20 would have been cut. To spend 40 or 50 for a second election would be completely irresponsible.
Mr. Attorney?
Do I really need to go into it?
No, but I'm going to put you down as a yes before you even answer.
Well,
Yeah.
the other question, obviously, we don't have 5 willing to pierce the cap. So my next question should be, what are we going to do if the proposition fails? Do we take the money from reserves or do we make the cuts? I want to hear from everybody here on that one.
Well, we'll do my next one.
Okay.
My next leaning.
I'm for piercing where I think we could fill the rest of the gap up and make the whole difference up, but that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But to ask people for $5 more a month, you're not even talking about the rate of inflation, because am I the only? Never mind.
No, Mike, it's not the $5. I mean, I'll pay for everybody on the board the $5. It's an emotional factor with the community. They're not going to do it. So it's not a matter of $5.
Vinny,
That's the challenge, right?
But you're not even giving them the chance to say so.
We gave it.
We
the
gave them a
chance.
chance
We gave
last
it the
year.
chance
When it was less.
last year.
Right.
And to Meredith's
And
point,
at 4.87, you got
$50,000 for another budget for another vote, right?
Jeez, that's what we're down to, $50,000 for.
And we have people working
Yeah.
very hard against us. So
Yeah.
Doing exactly what you know the accountant said not to do.
Yeah.
You preached about having a budget stable. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm going to weigh in because I'm going to say what my piece.
It's not sustainable
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah. I want to be able to, I give everybody the opportunity to speak first and I want to speak.
Sorry, I was
That's right.
responding to him saying, pointing at me.
Look, at the end of the day,
Yeah, he was pointing at me.
I've been in this situation before and, we did exactly what we're doing right now is we used our reserves, we used our unassigned fund balance and we moved money around. We got ourselves into a position where we had $16,000. And interesting enough, the community probably doesn't realize it, is that year we projected to have about 2.2 million in unassigned reserve, and our special education costs went through the roof, and we lost. We didn't unanticipated $2 million, and that's what brought us down to the 16. So at any given time, things could happen that could change our budget to put us in a really bad situation. Me personally, look, this if we were able to go out with 1% more per year over the last 5 years, okay, 1% per year above the proposed budget, we wouldn't be in this situation. Right? We had our tax levy would be at $5 million more, 5% more, and we wouldn't be talking about cuts. But we cannot continue to cut. Next year, we're talking about closing a school, and then we're still going to have a deficit. And then we're running out of things to cut. We have very few things left to cut. The only things that are left to cut are the things that are going to impact kids. It's really what it comes down to. The community is going to see down the road in the next couple of years. We're not expected to see a tremendous number of retirements probably until 3 or 4 years, maybe even 4 or 5 years down the road. So we have to weather the storm for another 3 or 4 years. There's not going to be anything left. When we have to go out to the community to pierce the cap, it's going to be a 5 or 6%. Okay, or we're going to lose all of the things that kids like to do. Yeah, we're going to go to austerity. We're going to have that year where we go out with a cap, it fails. We go out with a budget, okay, possibly to cap it again, it fails, and we're not going to have anything. I'm going to be honest with you. There's not going to be sports. There's not going to be clubs. There's not going to be after-school things, transportation, busing, capital projects. That stuff is all going to go away. So it has to happen. Okay, if you ask me right now, I would raise my hand to pass. Do I think it'll pass? Probably not, because we really need to go out with 5%, okay, in order to write the tax levy. But I'm just warning you that we got to be careful about using our reserves, and we got to be careful that if we allow it to get down to the levels that we did last time, okay, and it fails, we are going to lose everything. And look, if you ask me if I would raise my hand right now to pierce the cap, I would. Do I think we'll be successful? I don't. I don't think there's enough on the table that people are going to lose. But we're going to get to that point where we're not going to have a choice. The things that are going to be on the table are going to be draconian. And that's my concern. So there's not a board majority. And I certainly respect the board and certainly go in that direction of the board. But those are my own personal opinions.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, Rob, just one
Ben.
comment. So again, goes back to the comment I made. We've got to get to next year, and the community is going to realize we have a major restructuring to do. We're talking about one elementary. In my mind, it's 2 elementary. It's a middle school. It's multiple buildings, because if you look at the enrollment numbers, we can fit them in that, right? So those are the tough conversations that are going to take place. And then perhaps the conversation about look where we are, and then we have to go out for a Pierce.
I don't
But we have to
disagree
get our
with you.
house in order first before we go out and do that. So.
Yeah. Stephanie?
I agree with exactly what he just said. One of the hard discussions we didn't have is why aren't we going to the max with the bus resolution? And I don't want to do that. But is it the responsible discussion to have because we're taking out of reserves? I see Mike's point. He's 100% correct that we shouldn't be going into reserves. We don't want to strip every single thing away from the community. But it's irresponsible to not have these discussions, possibly. Or are we being gracious by helping ease people into this so we can weather the storm together, right? So, this is 27 years of this resolution. Where would we have been had we fixed this years ago, 10, 15, 20 years ago? You know what I mean? When we couldn't afford it. Like, these are the discussions we need to have. This is the ugly reality of it all, and it's heartbreaking.
Stephanie, the hard thing, not to cut you off, is, when we talk about 10, 15 years ago, 20, even 20 years ago, I was around, we can count on $4 or $5 million a year in state aid increase, and we could have a 5-year plan. We were able to say, hey, you know what, this is what we're going to do. And prior to the tax cap, okay, we were going out with zeros. And one year we went out with a negative. Okay. But once they implemented a tax cap and they implemented that 60% rule, it really restricted us on being able to create revenue for things in the community.
Our
community
hands
members
are
want.
tied.
So when you
right?
have one year
That's
we
what
went
it
out with a
is.
Pierce budget and we got 58%, and that failed. It failed 58%. But 58% of the community said they wanted to restore and keep the things that we have in place. So there's a problem with the system. There's no question about it. But the thing is it's so hard to plan because we envisioned last year we thought we were going to get an additional $3 million, right, to hold harmless. Okay, we didn't. This year we're anticipating $1.2 million stated. Now we're projecting $620,000. It's impossible to be able to keep up with the things and the expenses, not knowing, okay, the volatility
I
of what we're going to get stated.
100% agree with everything you said. I'm just
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
that we're not going to the bare bones yet.
Absolutely no.
Yeah,
No.
and-
That would be draconian. We
Right.
wouldn't want to do that. Vinny?
Yeah, so just one comment to the community, right? I know the SCTA went up to Albany with boxes and boxes of letters. The community did what, over 1,000+ letters. We need to start holding Albany accountable for what they're doing, right? Because everybody's just sort of passing the buck, and we're stuck here. So again, it goes back to we've got to hold the elected officials accountable, and they've got to change the system. But right now, our hands are
Mhm.
tied.
Absolutely. Right. So we have, I'm sorry, Mary.
Like I said, I can't see piercing it this year, but I can see that it absolutely has to happen. If you look, last year's budget was 374 million. This year is 380 million. And it's not like we ran out and bought a bunch of stuff and did a bunch of things and added a bunch of programs. We cut, and our expenses still went up 6 million. And a big bulk of that is salaries, employee benefits, retirement. Those are things that even if we said we made cuts to employees, and we have made cuts, but if we make further cuts, there's only so many employees that you can cut. Even though we have lower enrollment, we still have over 11,000 children to educate. So even with lower enrollment, we still can only go to a certain number anyway. So no matter what, even if we made these crazy cuts and increased class sizes and did all these things, you're still going to have these increases. You're never going to go and say, okay, last year's budget was 380 million. Next year's budget's 380 million. It's not going to happen. So if we can't find revenue right now, you know, there's no fairy godmother that's going to come and give it to us next year. And we, you know, as a matter of fact, what we get gets cut. So I can't support it this year only. And I wish I had another year to show you guys that I would support it next year. I can't support it this year because I just don't think that the community is going to support it. But I'm telling the community, as somebody who was 100% against any piercing of the cap, it's going to need to be done. And we're going to each have to put our hand in our pocket a little bit more to help out the entire district. It's, you know, it's not fair to the children at this point.
Vinny?
Yeah, just to piggyback on, I think one thing you said, Meredith, last meeting, I actually called out the fact that we have 178 million in salaries. And so we need to look at that. Since then, I've had an opportunity to sit with the administration and go a lot deeper into that. To your point, Meredith, the cuts aren't there. We're skeleton crews in some areas, right? We continue to cut. It's going to have devastating impacts on the students, right? And even if you look at non-instructional, you can't. We still have to run 15 buildings, right? There's nowhere to cut right now with that. So yes, we're commended, Mike, for keeping our salaries at 1.77% or whatever it is. But it's still, we can't go any lower right now. Not
And
at this point. I
and
think
for
we
all
have
the
to
people
continue
who say-
forward, but not at this point today. So
For all the people who say things like, oh, cut sports, cut drama, cut music. Some kids, that is all that they have. Some kids only show up in these buildings every day because that is what they have. That is part of educating them. That is part of making them be better human beings. So if you continue to say, and I've been called out for saying this, and people have crucified me because I believe that an entirely educated child is not just one that sits in a classroom and takes notes and passes tests. An entirely educated child is one who is socially, emotionally, and physically able to sit there and do all that is asked of them as a member of society. Not everybody is going to be a test taker. Not everybody is going to go on to a professional education after high school. So when you tell us to keep cutting and cutting and cutting and cutting, you are harming these children. Not everybody can actually go to college, and some people go to college and still can't function after that. You're not going to have responsible adults. You're not going to have adults that understand how to work in a team way, and that's not just sports. I was at the drama production. I cannot believe from the actors and actresses to the musicians. I cannot believe what it takes to put on one of these performances. We're teaching our children so much more with all of our extracurricular. So don't come at us and say it's education only and it's only our responsibility to educate them in the classroom. It's our responsibility to make good human beings that are productive in their life.
We're gonna, one last comment, and we're gonna go on to the next item. Okay,
This
Stephanie?
is quick. It's we're also being factored in as being a wealthier district than our surrounding neighbors who are getting much more funding, like Longwood, Middle Country. I could keep going. So it's and then our hands are tied because we can't have a tax cap without 60%. So people need to be aware of that as well. It's not everything that is happening here in our control.
All right, so on that leaning, we have, obviously a majority that does not feel comfortable piercing this year, but maybe in the future. Second item is to restore funds to transportation to 1.75 million. The way I understood it, okay, to possibly remove Proposition 2, or if Mike said, if the proposition fails, is the board willing to then further cut 1.75 million? So the way I understood what the question was asked last week is that if we were to take that off the table for purposes of safety, what would the cuts look like? And you presented the cuts on the board. Is the board willing to take this off the table, okay, and make those cuts, or leave it as is and leave it up to the community? So that's the second leaning. Am I clear on that?
Yes.
I will start this way, Mike.
I apologize. No, I'll leave the proposition on. My question would be, if it fails, where does the money come from?
Well, that would be the next conversation. Yeah. Meredith?
I'm all for keeping it on.
Leave it
Laura?
on.
All right. Vinny?
Yes, keep it on.
Alex?
I'm okay with keeping it on, but I don't like the major streets like Patrick Holbrook Road, those kids that live on Scopolitas over there, Church Street area, over across Vets, all across Portion if they walk to Linwood, and anybody that has to cross over the LE. I mean, those are, just for factual information, we're run by New York City Democrats. That's who runs the New York State Assembly and the New York State Senate. And for those of you that need a civics lesson, that's just the way it is. The people that don't want to talk politics. Those kids are given subway MTA free tickets, and that counts for the mileage. So you're talking about kids who are riding subways compared to kids that are crossing over major highways. I mean, this is not a comparison. So that's the stuff that we need to clean up when we have legislative committees, and we're dealing with people who are just they're not thinking on the same brainwaves, and that's why we talk about annexing Long Island and letting us make our own decisions, because the decisions that they make are just not aligned with our values. But I'm okay with keeping it on. But we have to look at those roads.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Matthew?
Yeah, I would keep it on.
Okay.
We can't afford to put it back.
Yeah.
So we have
Okay.
to.
I'm okay with leaving it on.
And my opinion is, once again, and I think I speak on behalf of the entire board, it's not something we want to do. Unfortunately, it's something that we're forced to have to make this decision because of the lack of revenue in state aid. So I'm okay with leaving it on and letting the community decide. All right. With that said, the only other option, and we'll get to Mike's thing, because I don't know how we answer that question, but certainly we will. We'll toss it around for a little bit. The only option is to accept the recommendations, okay, of the budget proposal that administration made. We charge them with coming up with a budget, okay, that has the least impact on kids with regards to education opportunities. Administration worked diligently to be able to do that and present to us this year's budget that does not increase class sizes at the elementary level for less than three sections, okay, total 2 sections right now that may be impacted.
It's at 2 right now, and that's with hoping that we don't have to break any more sections due to special ed sections. But right now, it's two
We're
classes
keeping,
with no impact.
98% of our sports, okay? We still have field trips. We still have invitationals. We still have opportunities for kids to be able to enjoy the academic day. So we'll take a leaning, because we have to get direction tonight as to which way we want to go. So we started here, Sabrina. Recommendation is to,
I don't agree with taking from reserves.
but we have to get direction tonight. Do we want to go out with what we're proposing? Okay, what administration is recommending? Either a yes on the proposed budget or no.
Well, I'm answering because I'm saying then are we answering Mike's question
Well,
that
the thing is,
are we
I don't know
taking
how
from?
we answer that question just
Well, because
said.
basically, are we taking from if it fails, are we taking from reserves or are we doing these reductions? That's what we have to answer.
But
The
we have to find
recommendation
out
is
if
to take
if it's
from
going to pass or
reserves.
fail. That's unknown, but we could throw that scenario next. I mean, our
So
only
can you
option,
clarify again? I'm sorry, I thought that's
the
what
only
we were
option we
answering.
have, we're gonna answer that question.
Maybe Michelle, they really got to be framed as if we go out with 379-235-606, right? That would envision that the proposition failed, and this is where the budget would be balanced. That's right. Or I guess my question would be, if you went out at sorry.
So
$380 million budget.
$380 million
No,
budget.
I'm saying that's what go back to that slide with the cuts.
Isn't this the budget we're approving today?
Yeah, Mike, here's my only concern about, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. We're saying if the transportation budget passes, is the board willing to cut the $1.7 million, the ugly list that we put up there?
If it doesn't pass me,
If
it
it fails,
fails.
if the proposition fails, okay?
I don't think she
So,
can show it that way. She
no,
can't show it
so-
that way.
No, I'm not asking to show it that way. You're asking us, okay, that if that proposition fails, is this board willing to make those cuts? Is that
No,
it?
you got to do it. You can't do it that way.
What are you asking?
If I understand, Michelle, you're saying we have to go out at the reduced budget.
So the budget we're proposing is $380.9 million.
Right. That's
That's a balanced budget covering our transportation costs fully.
correct.
Let's pretend Prop 2 isn't there, okay? We have to be able to fund it in case it were not to pass. If it were to pass, we would have $1,750,000 to put back in reserves at the end of that next school year.
No,
But right now, what we're asking is if we go out with the 380.9 million, does the board want administration to say that $1,750,000 is coming from reserves to balance the budget? Or is it through reductions? And now we're at that lower budget amount.
Well, that's where I was going.
I took that meeting as to do we want to make the $1.7 million in cuts to balance the budget? I did ask that. Is one or not?
No,
So Michelle,
I have a question on that though.
1.7.
I have a question on that.
I want to go out with the 380 and then if the and do it how Michelle is recommending.
So right now we have not going out with a Pierce, keeping Proposition 2. And then are we using the reserves to fund transportation at a $380.9 million budget? Or are we cutting the $1,750 and going out with a $379.2 million budget? I think that's the,
So
I have a
the
question before that.
1.7 is what we're voting on to come from reserve.
right. Either it's coming from reserves and the budget is 380.9 million, or it's reductions and it's 379.
All
I have a question that might help.
Hold on.
Regardless, we have to have a balanced budget.
All right. So the question is the board okay with the leaning I'm taking, the recommendation that's being made by administration, that $380 million, okay, is this what we want to go out with next week when we adopt the budget? That's what I'm asking for.
Yes.
All right, Sabrina, you're a yes. All right,
Wait, I
Stephanie.
have a question though before we.
yeah, I got.
I just have. If we go out with the 3.8, then that means that
380
the
million.
380, then that means that we have the 1.75 in there from reserves.
Correct.
And if we go out with the other one, the 379, then that means that we've made all these cuts to get to the 379. And if the Prop 2 passes on the 3, and we went out with the 380, then we just take that money and put it right back in reserves. If that Prop 2 passes on the 379, we've already cut middle school sports. We've already cut 10 teachers. Can you get those back? No.
Hmm.
So the safer bet, and I know you hate this, the safer bet is take it out of reserves, because if it passes, it goes right back into reserves. The other way, you've already cut 10 teachers and ruined their lives. You've already taken middle school sports away from all the kids.
Yeah. So the leaning is the proposed budget at $380 million. Okay. Is everybody okay with that? Sabrina?
Yes.
Yes.
Stephanie? Matthew?
Yes.
All right, Alex?
I apologize. I'm still a little confused. So what is this list?
This
Yeah.
is not, go back.
I want to know what this list is.
You have to decide.
I need Patty to
All right,
answer.
Okay.
Can I get Patty to
Michelle,
answer?
Michelle,
Or
please
Michelle
answer.
or somebody?
Okay, that
Who's proposing
list, if you didn't agree to take it out of reserves, if it was to fail, then this is the list of the cuts. But you can't present it that way. So we'd have to adopt a budget saying we're going to cut this with the understanding that it could fail.
We have to
And
present a balanced
budget.
budget.
So
So
we'd have to
we're
make these
either,
cuts.
what's in question is 1,750,000. So we either fund it through revenue, in this case reserves, or we reduce our expenditure.
I'm fine with the $380 million budget, but if it comes down to this list needs to be revised, because again, we love to go after the teachers first, but we haven't talked about admin at all. And this better start getting shared, because I'm not supporting it if it's not. We want to talk about middle school sports. We want to talk about teachers constantly. We don't talk about admin, and we don't talk about anything else.
So Alex, you okay with the 380
Yes.
proposed?
Yeah,
Vinny?
the thought of
Yeah.
eliminating middle school, I'm sorry, this thought of eliminating middle school sports entirely it's crushing.
We agree.
It's going to destroy our entire program. That's what I was talking about. Our school district is going to change. We're not going to have the same district. So if everyone's okay with that, I don't know what to tell you.
But
I'm
the-
not.
Matthew,
These cuts wouldn't
sorry.
happen. These cuts wouldn't happen because you're agreeing right now to take it out of reserves.
So I agree with the 380, Rob.
Okay,
380.
380.
Michael?
Question?
Yes, go ahead.
Michelle, but if you went out at 379 and the proposition passed, you wouldn't be able to make a budget adjustment back to put those things back in?
You don't have them. You went out 379 instead of 380.
Yes, but now you change your budget because the 1.75 is not expensed.
You passed a 379
All right.
budget. You got no more money to spend.
You have to adopt, you need a final adoption.
Yeah.
But the community passed a
Well, I believe what Mr. Isernier is asking is, so now we've reduced the expenditure side, Proposition 2 passes. In either scenario, Proposition 2 passes, we have that additional $1,750,000 from not spending those transportation costs. Can we do a budget adjustment to the tune of $1,750,000 and put items back?
I'd have to look into that and get back to you on that. I'm not prepared to answer that right now.
You can't, because the community
Yeah,
adopted
I
a
would think the- I-
379.
All right, so
I
right
would
now,
think you need a final number to be adopted, and you'd have to act out on that number for your operation.
so
I think when we talk about, like with PTA, when we say we would do a budget adjustment because those are donations, this would be
Yeah.
shuffling.
we have a majority right now at 380. To be honest with you. So next week, when the budget proposal is presented to the Board of Education, okay, it's going to be at the $380 million mark. Okay, and that's what we'll be going out to the committee with. All right. Proposition 2, we already did that. There is a resolution, okay, to approve Prop 2 to appear on the ballot, okay, on here. So we get to that. I guess, Michelle, if you need any clarification, you can provide that. And any other questions about the budget? You
One
guys
last
have
question, Rob.
Good.
Is there a reason why we can't wait till the last possible day to adopt? And then what happens if some miracle happens and we get more or we get less? Isn't there then wiggle room to fix and change?
We have between the 9th and the 22nd.
I'm saying, why do it on the 9th? Why not just do it? Yeah.
If we wait that long, we run into major problems with preparing our 10 buildings for budget vote day. We run a risk of not having our ballots in time, not having all the supplies we need. It would be a nightmare.
So then what is the plan then if the state does come down with more money? We're going to put it back into. Okay. So the cuts are going to stay the same and we're going to just put it into
Right.
reserves.
That would be surplus when we close the books. That would go back into fund balance at
Okay.
the end of the year.
All right. Any other We can move on. All right, thank you, Michelle. You have clarification? You guys know exactly how to proceed. Okay. All right, no other reports, Mr. Remedy? All right, student board member reports. Michael?
Good evening, everyone. Not a whole lot has happened this week, but March Madness has started, and Spear Week does start next week. And the first 400 students that come into HMI School East will be handed a lei for Hawaiian Day, which is the first Spirit Day.
Okay, great, thank you, Mike. Okay, item D is the approval of minutes, March 26th. Any motion, please? Mike Cerny, second by Laura Slattery. Questions or discussions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. We do have some visitors tonight. We'll call you up. You have 3 minutes to present your concerns and comments to the board. First up, George Iacone.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
is that the light on the microphone? Yeah.
Okay. Hi, my name is George Anacom. Most of you guys know me. This is confusing as anything. I don't envy any one of you. This is not the way to do things, and I'm not mad at anybody. But there's a lot of things. It's like, can you hear me?
Yeah,
We're just going to hand you the other microphone.
Just make sure you keep this one close to your mouth because it doesn't work either if you don't.
Is this better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that. It's a lot of things. I don't envy what you guys have to go through. This is not easy, but it's just like, I don't know. It's just like, you want the $5? Fine. I'll give you the extra $5. That's not the problem. But then, but hear me out. It's like you're spending almost $1 million for a power line for a school that has nothing to do with us anymore because you rent it out, probably at a loss. And then we're spending $200,000 on hose bibs. I kind of sell pipe for a living and I sell hose bibs. So $200,000 for hose bibs. I sell them for $10. I sell them for $500. How many hose bibs are you putting around in this district? And then what are you watering with all these hose bibs? How much is that water costing? So so on my street, I live on Hopes Avenue, not the biggest street, not the smallest street. If you doubled my taxes tomorrow, okay, I still couldn't pay, the whole street couldn't still pay a fraction of what you want to do just to pay for a power line for a school that we don't have. The district is too big. Okay, these excess buildings are costing us. We're spending money. So that's $1 million that could have went for something else, another boiler for a school that we do need, or for the kids, for a roof that we do need for our kids. Okay, and other schools are being rented out, but it always irked me. $200 million for a bond issue years ago, $50 million plus for Sequoia. I know that because I remember that. Over $50 million, we rented out. Okay, no benefit to this district, no benefit to our kids. With mistake after mistake, it's that this district, and it's not mad at you guys. You guys inherited a nightmare. But to keep asking for more money, it's tough. And I'm just really upset about it. I'll give you the $5. You pass the cap, I'll pay it. But you guys better come up with something like, you really have to figure how to shrink the footprint of this district. Okay, what's Gate Lot doing for this district? Zero. Okay, zero. Okay, the company we're renting it out. We're not in the real estate business. Okay, you guys are really good at the education business. Really are. I have 2 kids that went through this district, and really it was weird. It's like a 24-year span that my kids are in this school because of the age difference. Okay, 24 years I've been around with this stuff since they first started. When the time ends, it's been 24 years. And you guys are excellent at the education business. You guys suck in the real estate business. Okay, I don't mean it in a bad way, but that's not your thing. So
You're approaching 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, we're not going to comment. We're not going to comment. Thank you. Jessica Avaldus. I'm sorry if I got it so wrong.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Good evening. Just to echo what he was saying, I don't envy any of your jobs during this time. I'm sure it's very difficult, and just hearing the debates that you guys are having up here, I could just imagine what happens behind closed doors. But I do have a few words that I put together that I would like to share. So good evening. My name is Jessica Abdulas, and I have 2 children, a 5-year-old named Lincoln, who is currently a kindergartner at Merrimack, and a 3-year-old named Lila, who I hope will be part of the UPK program next year. Fingers crossed. My family and I are relatively new to the district, having purchased our home in the Sachem area just over 3 years ago. Neither my husband nor I are alumni, nor do we have any immediate family connections to Sachem. When we were house hunting, I wasn't focused on towns, but rather on school districts. There were certain districts I hoped to be a part of, and Sachem was at the top of my list. As an outsider, I had heard so many wonderful things about Sachem and its community. When we closed on our home and knew our children would be attending Sachem schools, we were excited about the opportunities this would provide for them. However, after listening to the Board of Education meetings week after week, I find myself increasingly disheartened and tempted to put a for sale sign on my front lawn. Each week, we hear about potential cuts that stir up unrest among different subgroups within the district, such as elementary parents, cheer parents, the parochial school parents. While I understand that cuts are sometimes necessary and that we can't please everyone, I'm here to ask the board a few important questions. When will we begin planning for the future beyond just the next school year? When will we shift from being reactive to being proactive? Why are we scrambling to schedule extra meetings to determine which budget to adopt when the budget has supposedly been under review since September? Have we reached out to other districts? Sorry, flip the page. Other districts who have been in similar situations to see how they've handled their situation. I have 2 young children with many years of education ahead of them, and I hope that whatever decision the board makes now and in the future, they will consider their long-term needs. If we continue to make cuts at this rate, by the time they are each in high school, there may be no extracurricular activities left, and the class sizes could be as large as 50 students. I strongly encourage the board to start thinking about the long-term future of Sachem, not just how we will manage for the next school year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jessica. Maria Sanders? Ears must be ringing, Maria.
So you're really giving me a microphone. Hi, my name is Maria Sanders. How are you? I had no intention of being here tonight. I was actually picking up my daughter's Chinese food and was like, okay, they've said my name one too many times. I know you can't answer questions, but I have an ask. When we receive the BOCES allotment, is that going to be earmarked to go back into arts and education? So for those of you that maybe don't understand the process the way that we use it, the district gets that BOCES rebate money, and the allotment per building, I think this year's, and Michelle can correct me, I think they ranged from 16,000 to about 40-something thousand per building. The secondary schools get a little more. That money goes into programs and trips and whatnot. I can't speak to that. Once that money is spent, per our conversation back in October, I spoke with the PTAs and said, you know, in the past, we paid our balance at the end of the year, so we're not going to do that now. If you want to book additional programs, you want assemblies, you want trips, anything that you're going to financially cover, we need to pay it within kind of a 30-day window. So as soon, we can't prepay a bill until we receive it, kind of like you guys, we need that work order. But as soon as they receive those bills, they can, as long as they have the money, and again, they've been directed, don't book anything you don't have the money for. So raise the money, find a program that fits, and by program, like I said, it could be an assembly, it could be a trip, it could be whatever. You make the money, you find what you can afford, and then you book it, and then it will go, you know, they're typically booked through arts and education, through the district, and as soon as that bill comes, y'all need to pay it. I did get, some of the schools have not necessarily received, like they've said, they're not necessarily receiving them every month. So that there's, I mean, obviously I have to get the approval, but I can speak with certainty and say the PTAs will have no problem paying as soon as those bills come in. So Sachem isn't sitting on bills, you know, until the end of the year. However, I can also say, if that seed money, that BOCES rebate isn't allocated to the schools, the PTAs cannot make up that money, because we're talking about over $400,000. That's the seed money that goes into these programs. I had one school today, I actually just got a text. They canceled a trip, God, I can't even tell you where, to one of the the Cornell Cooperative, because they realized it was going to be about 20, I think it's a second grade trip. They realized it was going to be about $20 per student, and they didn't think that the parents could afford that. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, like that rebate money. Again, I mean, my ask is, once we get that allotment, will that be earmarked? I also don't see any problem with PTAs earmarking the donations that they're making. They only made them in the form of a donation because that's what we were advised to do. But if it's better for us to specifically earmark that money for arts and education through BOCES, I can speak with certainty and say there's not going to be any issue with that. I can also facilitate a meeting, and you can tell me, I believe PTA council can call a meeting and invite the board president and the superintendent to talk to us in respect to the budget and perhaps changes.
That's correct.
Okay. So I have absolutely no problem. I welcome that meeting. I'm sure our PTAs will welcome that meeting to have a conversation. But I think that's kind of where the confusion is. If we know that once the district gets that allotment, it will go back into that, it will make it easier for us to function. If PTAs are expected to make up that money, I can tell you, some of my PTAs don't even bring in like that $40,000. Like if we're looking at $400,000, predominantly it's coming from the elementaries. Some of them certainly can't cover it. And my question is, like, I know the PTA piece, we've tried to, I believe it's increased over the years because we've discovered that things like a 5th grade trip to Broadway can be run through BOCES, which makes, once it's booked through BOCES by the district gets aid on it. I think the financial piece is kind of, there's definitely been some confusion on our end too, because it sounds to me like it was more an issue of the line item that it went into. Like we're looking at it like we're giving money to the district to cover it, but you're looking at it from you're utilizing district funds to pay it, right?
Miss Sanders, I'm sorry. You're
Thank
over your
you.
3 minutes.
And Maria,
that's-
we could definitely schedule a meeting and we can kind of go over this, but Michelle, if you can get the questions that Ms. Sanders has answered, mine, and I'll ask you the question, if that state aid comes back the following year as a result of the arts and education, is that money then we could put in our budget? We could earmark it for arts and education?
We don't find out the amount until December of the next year. So it's hard to budget. So that seed money would have to be budgeted. That would have to be put into that line item. That's what we're talking
Okay.
about, where
But we could estimate on something like that.
we could estimate, because
Sure,
we don't
roughly.
get funded on all of the trips.
Yeah.
It's only eligible programs, and BOCES, I don't know how they come
And it
up
could
with
be
the eligible.
earmarked for future trips. Okay, so hopefully we should get back to you with the other questions you have. All right, thank you. Any other visitors? Okay. Business items, we have item A, proposition resolution 2025-26. This is obviously the school transportation eligibility requirements that we talked about. Any motion, please? Vinny, a second. Okay, Meredith, questions or discussions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Item 4, personnel consent agenda A to receive for teachers. Motion, please. Matthew Bauman, second. Mike Isernia, questions or discussions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Item 5 is closing comments. All right, no? Okay, board discussion items. We had them tonight. So there's nothing on the agenda. Future discussion items. Any future discussion items from any board members? No. All right. No future discussion items. I need a motion to go into exec session to discuss a student appeal of a suspension, as well as a personnel item made known to the Board of Education. Stephanie, first. Vinnie Randall, second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.